Some stars of a popular auction show took a break at Kiole and never returned to your screens.
From dust to diamonds, these Storage Wars stars turned everyday storage units into their ticket to mansions. Want to know who hit it big? The truth might surprise you. Let's begin. The hallway is always the same at first. Cold light, numbered doors, the rasp of a lock cutter over steel. Then something different sneaks in, a feeling that the risk at that doorway is quietly paying for rooms far from this concrete echo. Not everyone who bid on a mystery box ended up with a grand staircase, but some did, and the way they got there tells you more about wealth than any dramatic reveal on television ever could. If you have spent late nights with this world, you already know the edited magic. 5 minutes at a doorway becomes a neat story. Dollars in, dollars out, a tidy appraisal, a grin, a lesson. Real wealth does not move like that. It creeps in with systems and patience. It shows up when a shop opens on time, when a truck route makes sense, when a buyer knows what to leave behind as precisely as what to grab. It looks like a quiet signature on a property deed after 100 messy halls, not one lucky locker. The mansion in the hills is the last chapter. The first chapter is a rented warehouse with good shelves and a broom. There is a trap in the way we talk about getting rich from television. We imagine the show as a mint printing checks on a reliable schedule. The truth is that unscripted day rates rarely buy mansions. The show is a billboard at rush hour. Eyes land on you. If you own a business that can convert those eyes into invoices, the billboard is priceless. If you do not, the billboard is a bright light and then a long drive home. The people who actually climbed took the attention and fed it to an engine they already had, or had the discipline to build in a hurry. Think about the man who never looked rushed. He walked into the frame like a retirement plan that bought cool cars for fun. Barry Weiss made risk look elegant, because his risk was not rent. Long before his grin became a reaction shot, he had built and exited a wholesale produce business that gave him what most buyers never have on a bad day. Breathing room. That breathing room let him chase oddities, pass on thin margins, and say yes only when yes felt like a story worth telling. It also let him turn television into leverage without letting television become the whole point. If you saw him in a car that cost more than a winning bid, you were looking at a truth the show could not narrate. Some people brought wealth to the lockers, then left with a little more, and the person who can walk away stays rich longer than the one who cannot. Then listen for the chant that never loses time. Dan and Laura Dotson do not need a hero item to make a week. They are auctioneers with a business that predates any theme music. The show gave them recognition that money cannot buy cheaply. Their company turned that recognition into bookings, contracts, and a pipeline that does not care if an episode reruns in prime time or at 2 a.m. Owning the lane is a wealth move. They did not rent a moment. They built a road. Every facility that calls, every estate attorney who asks for professionalism, every junior auctioneer who trains under their standard puts another brick under a house you cannot see from the highway, but can feel in the way a calendar fills. You can almost hear the counterargument arrive like a gavel. What about the mogul, the man whose catchphrase could be heard 3 parking lots away? Dave Hester is the other version of this story, the one that makes a fortune by turning a name into a machine. He did not invent his expertise for the camera. He brought it with him, along with stores and a nose for which doorways hide profit and which ones only hide bills. The edit amplified his persona, and he treated that amplification like capital. Signs, shirts, bookings, brand. None of it works if you cannot deliver on the floor, but if you can, the name draws the customers and the systems move them through. That is where wealth lives in this world, not in a single day rate, but in 1,000 small conversions that a recognizable face accelerates. The volume looks different, but smells the same. Renee and Casey built a life on pallets, aisles, and fast flips. They are not waiting for a miracle item to save a month. They are turning truckloads into categories, categories into buyers, buyers into repeat business. When television introduced them to the world, they did not change their religion. They scaled it. A bigger warehouse, a sharper sort, a better outbound. That kind of operation is not glamorous to a camera, but it is magnetic to cash flow. The people who end up in larger homes often have the least cinematic days, and that is the point. The quiet compounding of a boring process builds more equity than 100 dramatic reveals. Every legend needs a headline, and Daryl Sheets supplied one with an art-packed locker that still gets cited whenever someone tries to argue that luck is a plan. A giant score is oxygen. It feeds the fire. It does not build a fireplace. The buyers who stay ahead take a slice of a windfall and move it into something that returns money without anyone lifting a box. Debt cleared. A second warehouse was purchased. A stake in a small strip mall that houses the shop. The mansion people love to imagine is usually the visible tip of a decision made in a much less exciting office months earlier. Convert some luck into something slower, and your fortune stops depending on the next lot. The story looks different when the star is a brand in her own right. Brandi Pasante understands the value of being known without being swallowed by the machine. After years of being seen as one half of a framing duo, she found a pace that protects her life and makes her money. That is wealth too. The ability to say no and mean it. To take the projects that align with your time and your kids and your pressure gauge. When a name becomes its own draw, the person can work less and earn better. That is not a showy ascent. It is a durable one. The craftsperson's climb is quieter still. Mary Pattian took a sanded tabletop and turned it into a business that paid for a studio you would actually want to spend a day inside. The camera loved her eyes. Clients loved living with it. If your work commands a premium because people trust your taste, you can raise prices and lengthen timelines until your calendar starts looking like wealth. You do not need to sell 1 million t-shirts if the pieces you sell buy you space. And space is where you make more beautiful work without burning out. The house that craft builds is not just shelter. It is the right kind of time inside it. The steady shop is the most underrated mansion maker of all. Ivy Calvin's grandma's attic did not become a tourist trap because of television. It became a local habit because of consistency. A well-run shop prints stability. It turns foot traffic into repeat customers, turns regular hours into predictable income, and turns those two into staff who can run a day without you. Stability is the soil where wealth grows. One day, a shop can be sold. Or not. Either way, it shelters a family and funds a future without asking the owner to sprint every morning into another long day of dust and surprise. There are other faces whose wealth never needed a spotlight. Nabila played the long game long before any of this. She bid where it mattered, bought when it counted, and sold in rooms you do not film easily. When you know exactly what you are good at, you decline 90% of the noise. Scarcity does two jobs. It keeps your brain clear and your rates high. It also keeps strangers from walking up to your dinner table and asking how much you paid for a unit on Tuesday night. The quiet operator does not perform prosperity for us. She builds it for herself. You might be tempted to ask for numbers. How much did the show pay per episode? What did the big find fetch after fees and taxes? The truth is boring, and that is the wisdom. Rates vary. Contracts differ. Taxes eat the shiny parts of a story. What matters is the shape of a life. The people who got rich in the way that sticks had 6 quiet advantages. They had experience before the light found them. They invested in the infrastructure that makes a hauler into a company. They turned a persona into a brand without letting it consume the business that pays the bills. They layered media on top of their core work to create recurring revenue streams. They moved into ownership behind the scenes when the chance appeared. Even a small ownership stake changes the slope of a line. And when money stacked, they bought equity that returns rent, not just applause. All of that sounds simple, written down. It is not simple when the auction starts at dawn. Your back aches, your kid needs a ride, and the bank wants to talk about a line of credit you are not sure you want. This is why the mansion shot you see on a gossip site or a fan account rarely tells the full story. That staircase was paid for with 100 unfilmed decisions. Call the facility manager before anyone else does. Keep a loadout team on call. Build a buyer list for categories you do not love so that as soon as you see them, you can sell them in one phone call. Use the show to open a wholesale outlet in a nearby city and ship all medium-grade items there for fast cash. Pay a bookkeeper who knows resale taxes so your year-end does not punish your summer. The suspense in this kind of money story is not whether the locker holds a painting. It is whether the person holding the bid card can make a small surplus feel bigger tomorrow than it did today. Wealth is surplus that compounds. Compounding hides inside habits. Habits are boring to watch on a Tuesday night until you realize that someone built a house out of them. If you want a trick, here is the best one in this world. Speed up the cycle without cutting a corner that hurts you next week. Get items out of a unit, sorted, listed, or merchandised faster than you did last season. Every hour saved moves the whole operation forward a fraction. 1,000 fractions make a staircase. There is a tension running under all of this, and if you have watched long enough, you can hear it. Fame bends a business. People want selfies. Buyers want deals and also want to be on camera. Your inbox fills with invitations that look like money and feel like chaos. The stars who actually got rich learned to separate attention from income. They treat attention as a resource to be allocated, not a wave to surf until you crash. That means choosing a few public moments very carefully and letting the rest of your work disappear into the privacy where good decisions are easier to make. It also means converting the spotlight into something that does not flicker. Real estate is the old quiet trick. A second warehouse under your name instead of someone else's. A small commercial unit bought when credit is cheap because you have 2 years of consistent invoices to show. A modest home sold to buy one with a rental unit attached. That last part is not a mansion in a headline, but it is the move that buys back evenings and compresses the time between worry and sleep. Equity, that pays you for standing still, is the opposite of reality television. It is the part that lets you do reality television on your own terms. If you want a clean test for who climbed, look for people who can disappear for a season and come back because they want to, not because they must. Barry could. The Dotsons could. Scrappers like Hester, who built stores and systems, could. Volume players like the Nazotas can pivot, close a retail front, spin up another, and keep the wholesale engine humming. Craftspeople like Mary can post a single photo of a finished piece and already have calls waiting. Shop anchors like Ivy can take a week and not lose a customer. Quiet operators like Nabila can skip a year and still find the right rooms when they return. Wealth sounds like options. Options sound like a voice you do not hear, panicking. You can hear the critics too. They will say that television distorted the market and that ordinary buyers cannot replicate this path. Both parts can be true. Television did change the landscape. Crowds got bigger. Prices rose in filmed caravans. Margins thinned in front of a camera. The ones who built real wealth adapted by shifting more of their buying to places the camera was not, by developing suppliers beyond units, by moving into estates, liquidations, and private deals that never trend. Reality TV is a wide door that leads to a narrow hallway. The rich ones stepped through and then found more doors. The best part of this story is that it respects the people who never wanted a mansion at all. Plenty of honest winners built exactly the life they wanted and no more. A solid house in a good neighborhood, a paid-off truck, a shop that opens at 10 and closes at 6, a week of vacation far from dust. There is a reason some of them still smile after a long day, while others look thin around the eyes. Wealth is not what you can show a drone. It is how loudly your life needs you to shout in order to keep up. The quieter the life, the richer the soul running it tends to feel. So yes, some stars truly climbed from those units to homes that take 2 breaths to describe. They did not get there by magic or myth. They got there by treating attention like a tool, by building the boring spine of a real business, by saying no more often than the audience would guess, and by converting cash bursts into assets that do not care whether a season is renewed. The glamour shot is the last thing to arrive. The first is a morning where the auction is far away, the crew is already loading a truck you do not have to drive, and you are sitting with a banker discussing a loan you know you can service without the show. The camera should open not on a locker, but on a plain table with 2 stacks of paper and a coffee ring that looks like a target. Across it, a producer asks about availability, an agent asks about terms, and a buyer who once lived on auctions counts how many Saturdays they are willing to give away in the name of a story that will outlive the check. This is where the mansion fantasy either gets a real foundation or collapses into a postcard. The room is quiet, the math is not. Rates are never as glamorous as rumor suggests. Day rates rise and fall with seasons and leverage. Some seasons, cameras chase you. In other seasons, you chase cameras. The buyers who actually build wealth treat this meeting like a supply contract, not a lottery. What matters most is what the episode buys for the business after the credits. If an appearance triggers another month of inbound customers at the shop, a surge in online orders, or a line out the door for a live sale, the number on the contract becomes a small piece of a much larger equation. If the appearance burns time while the shop sits quiet and inventory piles into a corner you no longer see, that same number becomes a distraction wearing a nice jacket. There is a second question no one on television ever says out loud because it is not fun to hear. Do you own anything about the story you are telling? Most reality talents sell time and face. The show owns the rest. That is fine if you are ready to convert attention in your own channels the minute an episode airs. It is less fine if you think a credit will behave like equity. The few who graduate from talent to creator, even in tiny ways, change the slope of their lives. An executive producer line on a spin-off, a revenue share on a live tour, a stake in a company that services the show's world. Very few get those deals because very few ask, and even fewer have the leverage to hold the room still long enough to wait for silence. Which is why the people who end up with new keys in new neighborhoods did not wait. They built what they needed off camera and used the show as an amplifier. Picture a warehouse that smells like cardboard and ambition. Racks labeled with a marker someone replaced twice this year. An inventory system that started on a legal pad and now lives in a tablet with a barcode scanner. A buyer list organized by category so that when a unit coughs up restaurant equipment, a text sets cash in motion before lunch. None of this is pretty on television. All of it is the backbone of a fortune measured in habits rather than headlines. Then there is the moment where reputation becomes revenue in ways that do not look like flipping. Someone offers to sponsor the day you open a second location. Someone else asks you to teach a weekend workshop on negotiating with appraisers. A local venue wants you to MC a charity auction because your voice fills a room with energy and spending. A platform invites you to film short segments about tricky categories that confuse new buyers. Each one of those yes answers takes a future mortgage payment off the board. None of them require you to lift a safe down a flight of stairs. If you are waiting for the scene where a lawyer slides a property contract across the same plain table and the music breathes differently, here it is. The quiet truth behind most visible upgrades is a boring signature that sets up 10 years of quiet income. A second warehouse purchased instead of rented. A small industrial condo in a complex with a roll-up door and a parking space that has your name on it. The kind of space your accountant likes because it turns monthly outflow into equity. A modest house traded for another with a rentable unit over the garage that brings in a check whether you filmed last month or not. In some markets and under the right rules, people swap one business property for another to defer taxes and keep their capital working, but the headline you care about is simpler. The purchase turns a job into an asset, and assets are the only reason a drone shot ever points at a roofline you dreamed about. This is the part of the movie where the crowd expects montage and champagne. Keep the cork in place and roll the tape on the traps instead, because nothing kills a rise faster than the wrong story at the wrong time. The first trap is lifestyle. A big quarter is not a permanent raise. The day you treat it like one, your operations feel it. The second trap is tax. Inventory income and consignment splits can be messy, and messy is where penalties hide. The third trap is storage you cannot afford. Off-site units for overflow look cheap until they are a chain. The fourth trap is marketing that chases attention instead of margins. Merch with your face on it can be smart, but only if it leaves the warehouse faster than the stuff you know how to sell already. The fifth trap is a truck that looks great on camera and drinks your profit in gas. The sixth trap is debt you pretend is a strategy. Credit makes sense when it accelerates a sure cycle. It becomes a leak when it funds a vanity sprint. You may want named examples again, the way a map looks better with cities. Look back into that first hallway and reassemble faces with this new lens. Barry never needed the show to rent a house that looks like a set. That is why he remains the calmest example of wealth. He can enjoy the room because the room is optional. When he sits a season out, the quiet does not sound like fear. It sounds like a choice. Watch The Auctioneers for another lesson. Dan and Laura turned volume into gravity. When your calendar is full and your team can travel, you stop relying on one stream. Estate sales, commercial liquidations, charity events, specialty collections. Some weeks you do not see a storage unit at all. The brand outgrows the show and becomes the business the show wanted to emulate in the first place. If you are wondering how that turns into real property on a hillside, imagine decades of invoices coming in whether a camera is set up or not. Then imagine what happens when you decide to buy the building where those invoices get processed. Consider the scrapper with the branded catchphrase, "One more time." Dave knows the unglamorous truth that allows a business to exist in years when other people panic. A recognizable sign outside a store, a reputation inside it, a pipeline of inventory you can predict, and a willingness to let boring sales be the backbone of a year. You can disagree with a persona and still learn from the machine behind it. The machine is what pays for better floors and quieter nights. Renee and Casey speak a language that television only half understands. They talk in pallets, lots, manifests, clear outs, quantity that turns into quality because they know exactly who wants what and how fast they can take it. That scale supports exits you cannot pull off as a solo picker. It also funds investments that do not wink at the audience. Real wealth is a forklift that still runs after 10 years because you maintained it and a building you own to park it in. Daryl reminds you that a thunderclap can light a whole valley, but the fire you cook with still needs tinder. You can spend a windfall 3 times in your head. Close your eyes and see a different scene instead. An accountant setting aside a piece of that windfall to wipe out debt. A banker approves a loan because you can show a track record and a balance sheet that does not wobble. A renovation in a shop that doubles selling space. None of this is fun to film. All of it is fun to live with. Brandi's journey is the modern wealth story, not because it is loud, but because it is balanced. The richest line she ever said was not on camera. It was the moment she decided she could be a whole person with a public name without letting the public schedule write her calendar. That looks like fewer projects and better ones. It looks like saying no to easy money that costs too much time. It looks like being exactly the kind of person who can step back for a season and step in when the season fits. Mary's path stays the most satisfying to tell because the reward is shaped like something your hands can touch. A table with a history. A chair with a second life. A room that feels like a person. When a craftsperson raises their rates because the wait list says they can, that is wealth announcing itself in a whisper. You do not need a mansion when your studio feels like one. Ivy's Steady Store is the antidote to every myth pretending that wealth needs noise. Quiet hours, friendly faces, an open sign that means something to the neighborhood. When it is time to grow, that store can expand into the space next door or open a sibling a few miles away. One day, a sale of the business funds, the last tuition bill, and the first month in a new house. You did not see it, but your Tuesday nights made it possible. There is another cohort that deserves a bow, even if they never stand under a drone. Operators like Nabila, who do not chase television rounds. They learned early that privacy is profit. A low profile makes rooms easier to enter and deals easier to close. The mansion they buy is not part of our story because it was never meant to be. Respect is part of wealth too. Let us take a breath and talk about the crowd itself, because the camera does not show how it changed. When storage shows hit, auctions filled with curious faces and loud paddles. Bargains went undercover. Veterans changed routes and schedules to find margins that did not feel like a game show. When online platforms took over slices of the market, more deals moved to screens and warehouses. The stars who kept their heads did not complain about the shift. They built websites. They started live streams. They learned to host sales where their audience could join without driving across town. Wealth follows the people who find a way to keep serving value whenever the room changes shape. Editing shapes more than memory. It shapes who you think is essential. Entire shooting days with a familiar face can end up as one line of narration if the haul did not tie to the episode arc. Repeat that a few times and fans ask where someone has gone. The truth may be that the person never left, they just did not make the cut because the story needed another beat. When the season ends and they are holding the deed to a new space, you will not connect the scenes. That is how wealth likes it. Quiet wins are less likely to be negotiated away by a schedule. There is a sound that tells you someone is truly rich in the way that lasts, and it does not come from a garage door in a fancy house. It comes from a day where nothing needs to happen and no one panics. The kids still get picked up. The rent still clears. The shop is still open. The accounts still show a future that does not need a miracle on Thursday. Real wealth sounds like a life that can absorb news without breaking. If you want the suspense this channel owes you, hold it here. Will the next season make room for the ones who built the boring things? Will the audience reward scenes where a buyer says no to a risky unit because their numbers say it is time to protect the margin? Will someone surprise us by showing not a giant score, but the quiet profit of 100 small wins that add up to a new set of keys. The twist is that you get to decide. Watching with patience changes what gets made. Celebrating discipline makes discipline visible. The show will still cut locks and speed up sequences, because that is what television does. Your reaction determines whether the people who use those sequences to build actual freedom keep getting called back. There is a place for caution here, so slip it in like a note under the door. None of this is advice for your specific life. Your city, your laws, your family, your health, your appetite for risk will change every choice. What you can borrow from the mansion stories is not a blueprint for a house. It is a recipe for habits. Turn attention into customers you can reach without a middleman. Turn profit into assets that pay you when you are asleep. Turn crisis into a reason to slow down, not speed up. Turn a name into a promise, and then keep the promise. Now take the camera back to the hallway. The lights hum. Dust hangs in the frame. A lock drops and bounces once on concrete. A bidder steps forward and breathes. The dollar numbers you imagine are not the only stakes. Somewhere off-screen, a banker is waiting for a signature on a line that will make the next 5 winters easier. Somewhere else, a crew is unloading racks into a new space because a buyer finally bought the walls around their work. In another part of town, a parent who used to rush is sitting in a quiet kitchen at 3 in the afternoon, watching steam rise from a mug that does not need to be reheated because the afternoon is theirs now. From storage units to mansions, the story reads like magic if you start at the end. If you start at the beginning, it reads like people who learn to be boring in the right ways, brave in the right moments, and quiet at the right times. Fame ran through their world like a river that could flood or irrigate. The ones who got rich built canals and gates and never mistook a sunny day for a guarantee. That is not as fun to pitch, but it is the only version with a happy sequel. Fade out on a pair of keys on a counter and a note under them that says, "See you on Tuesday." The door in the next shot will still be steel and stubborn. The people walking to it will carry the same nerves you know well by now. Look closely, and you will notice one change you cannot unsee once you see it. Under the grit, under the banter, under the sprint, the ones who truly climbed move like people who can afford to pause. That pause is what a mansion really buys. Space to choose the next door, not just the one everyone is staring at. If this journey gave you a new lens, like and subscribe, share with a friend, and comment on one money lesson you spotted that could reshape your own work week this year.